Hey there, sweet friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Business of Inner Peace. I'm Erin Jean, and today we're diving deep into a topic that is close to my heart and probably affects more of us than we realize. Breaking free from generational patterns to heal our marriages and family legacies.
Welcome to the Business of Inner Peace. I'm your host, Erin Jean, and I'm so glad you're here. Let's pretend we're sitting in my living room enjoying a cup of coffee or tea and getting to know each other just a little better. That's what I love. I love getting to hear your story. I love feeling connected by the spirit of understanding that our stories bring. Today, I'm sharing some of my story, but I hope someday soon you'll be telling me yours. Listen, I know that you're feeling overwhelmed with life and nothing is exactly how you'd like it to be. Your marriage is not what you hoped for. Motherhood is harder than you imagined, and you've lost yourself somewhere in the mix of responsibilities. Well, if you're ready to bring some more peace and joy into your life, reconnect with God who made you, and start living a life you love, then grab your cup of coffee or tea and let's dive into today's show.
Have you ever caught yourself saying something to your spouse and thought, oh no, I sound just like my mother? Or maybe you've noticed that you and your partner keep falling into the same argument patterns that you witnessed between your parents growing up. If so, you are definitely not alone, and today's episode is especially for you. We're going to explore how these generational patterns affect our marriages, why they are so hard to break, and most importantly, how we can heal them to create the loving, fulfilling relationships we deserve. So what exactly are generational patterns? Simply put, they are the behaviors, beliefs, and ways of relating that we inherit from our families. These patterns can be positive, like traditions of expressing love and support, but often the ones that cause issues in our marriages are the negative patterns, things like poor communication, emotional distance, or unhealthy conflict resolution. So these patterns are passed down not just through what we're explicitly taught, but through what we observe and experience in our families of origin. They become deeply ingrained in our subconscious, shaping our experiences and behaviors and relationships, honestly, without us even realizing it. So the tricky thing about these patterns is that they often feel normal to us because they're all we've known. It's like wearing a pair of glasses with a slight tint. You don't realize that the glasses are actually affecting how you see the world until you take them off. So let's talk about how these patterns show up in our marriages. Here are some common ways. One would be through communication styles. So if you grew up in a family where emotions weren't openly discussed, you might struggle to express your feelings to your spouse. I've also seen this in the types of emotions that were permitted. So, for instance, in my husband's family, joy and laughter was definitely welcome. Anger was something that was also understandable to see, but any emotion outside of those two really made everyone uncomfortable. It's not like anyone ever made a rule about it, but it was very clear that those emotions weren't welcome. And so you had to process them in a different place, not with family or in public, if that makes sense. So sometimes this emotional, resistance can be about specific emotions. So that gives you something to think about. The other way this shows up is in conflict resolution. If your parents had volatile arguments or they gave each other the silent treatment, you might find yourself repeating these patterns in your own marriage. Expectations of roles is another place where this shows up. So your ideas about what a husband or wife should do might be heavily influenced by what you saw in your family. Then we've got the topic of emotional intimacy. So if you didn't see affection expressed between your parents, or thinking about your spouse, if your spouse didn't see affection expressed between their parents, either of you might find it challenging to be emotionally open with your spouse. And then that kind of becomes a new way of being between the two of you. I also see this come up in financial decisions. So your attitudes about money and how it should be managed in a marriage often stem from your family's approach. And it's not really just attitudes, it's also belief systems around money that can really have a big effect on you. And lastly, where I see this show up is in parenting styles. So the way you interact with your children, your expectations of them, they're often shaped by how you were parented, or sometimes in response to how you were parented. I actually have an aunt who told me that she felt like when she was growing up, she was never allowed to really speak and share her truth and share her feelings. And so as a parent, she wanted to give her children full permission to say whatever they wanted. And there were no boundaries on that. And so the consequence of it was she kind of swung the pendulum to the opposite side, and her children literally said whatever they wanted to say to their mother, which included calling her all kinds of names and treating her really poorly. So, it's interesting to sort of think about sometimes a pattern within our originating family. We really, really disliked it. And in our attempt to correct it, we can overswing to the other side and create another problem over there. So it's important to think about what these patterns are doing in our lives. And really the impact of these patterns, they can be profound. They can create recurring conflicts, emotional distance, and a sense of disconnection in our marriages. Even worse, if left unaddressed, we risk passing these patterns down to our own children, perpetuating the cycle. And that's really the biggest thing to me. This isn't just about your marriage. It's about creating further generations of dysfunction. So getting your eyes on this and really taking a look at what needs to be changed and how you can bring your subconscious mind into this, rewire some of these patterns to create a healthier future for your children and your grandchildren. It's huge, and it's well worth the work, I promise you. So here's the good news. Once we become aware of these patterns, we have the power to change them. Breaking free from generational patterns, it isn't easy. And there are several reasons for this. So the first one is that they're deeply ingrained. These patterns are often formed during our most formative years, and they are deeply rooted in our subconscious. They are definitely a part of our subconscious programming. They feel familiar. So even if these patterns are causing pain, they are what we know, and changing them can absolutely feel scary and uncomfortable, and it can honestly feel like a threat to your subconscious mind, and your subconscious can start sending you signals like, we're going to die, alert, alert. And you might not be aware of this consciously, but that could be the reason why you have a physical reaction to trying to change. Like it might cause a lot of stress and anxiety in your body just because your subconscious is literally trying to keep you alive, and it feels like changing the pattern could mean death. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm kind of going a deep dive on the subconscious here. The third way that these patterns can be difficult to change is because they're often unconscious, right? So many times we are not even aware of these patterns or how they're affecting us. And the fourth way it makes it so difficult, the fourth reason, is that they're reinforced by our families. So changing these patterns might mean going against the family norm, which can create tension and conflict. Because if you're making everyone else uncomfortable, it's often easier feeling-wise to just comply. And it can be pretty challenging to step outside of the pattern. But if you have the right support, you can absolutely do it. And then I would say the fifth way that reason that these become so difficult to change is because these patterns, they're intertwined with our identity. So they're often tied to our sense of who we are and where we come from. And when you actually step away from that and you're willing to look at it and question it, then there's so much power and possibility to change it. But remember, just because something is difficult, it doesn't mean it's impossible. With awareness, commitment, and the right tools, the tools that I love, we absolutely can break free from these patterns and create healthier, happier marriages. So how do we actually break free from these patterns, you might be wondering? Here are some key steps. The first one, which we've kind of already mentioned, it's awareness, right? You need to become aware of what's happening. So become aware of the patterns. Start paying attention to your behaviors, your reactions, and the dynamics in your marriage. Ask yourself, where did I learn this? And is this how things were in my family growing up? And I think it's really important to ask yourself, do I like this? Do I even like this? The second tip I have for you is to understand your family history. So take time to reflect on your family's history. What challenges did your parents and your grandparents face? How did they relate to each other? Understanding this context can help you to have compassion for yourself and for your family while also identifying the patterns that you want to change. My third tip for you is to identify your values. So what kind of marriage do you want to have? What values are important to you? Sometimes breaking generational patterns means consciously choosing a different path that aligns with your values. Tip 4, communicate with your partner. So share your insights with your spouse. Discuss the patterns that you've noticed and work together to create new, healthier ways of relating. At the very least, notice your own patterns. Let your spouse know, why it's a challenge for you, that you recognize the pattern, and they are actually going to be your best support in helping you notice when the pattern is up, because it's not their pattern. So they can point it out really, really fast. But if you stay open to that, and obviously there has to be a discussion about, I give you permission to do this kind of a thing. But if you stay open to that, that can be one of the biggest helps in this whole process. My husband actually has been so helpful to me in that process. Tip 5 for you is to practice self-compassion. One of my very favorite sentences is, of course I would feel this way. Because breaking long-standing patterns, it's not easy. You've got to be patient and kind with yourself as you work on making changes. And there's always the temptation to make ourselves bad or wrong when we kind of fall back into the pattern, or you can feel really frustrated because it can seem like something so simple and yet it's difficult for you to make the shift and to make the change. And so just be kind, practice your self-compassion. Again, I invite you to use my favorite sentence. Of course, I would feel that way. Just validate how you're feeling. Tip 6 for you is to seek support. So this journey can be challenging and it is okay to ask for help. In fact, I think it's required personally. So it might mean working with a coach like myself, or joining a support group, or confiding in some trusted friends and let them know what you're aiming to do. Tip 7, use tools. This is probably my favorite for subconscious reprogramming. Remember that many of these patterns, they're deeply rooted in our subconscious mind. And that's why I'm such a big advocate for tools like EFT, which is also known as tapping, because it can help rewire these subconscious patterns with really minimal conflict. It's like a pretty easy thing to do. All right, tip 8 for you is to create new rituals and traditions. So actively create new positive patterns in your marriage and in your family. And that could be something as simple as a weekly check-in with your spouse, or a new way of handling conflicts that you both agree upon. Particularly if you have a topic that is always charged, you can come together in a calm state and agree on the new way that you want to talk about it, and help create some boundaries on, if I'm getting too triggered or you're getting too triggered, here's what we're going to do. So you can kind of create a process on how to deal with the conflict instead of just letting the conflict deal with you and take over everything. And my last tip for you is to practice, because breaking old patterns and creating new ones, it takes time, and it also takes consistent effort. And you need to be patient with yourself and keep practicing new behaviors, and, use the tools. You really have to use the tools. You can't just learn about them. You have to put them into practice. So the impact of breaking these patterns, it can be truly transformative. Not only can it lead to a happier, more fulfilling marriage, but it can also create a ripple effect that extends to your children and your future generations, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren. So imagine being able to communicate openly and honestly with your spouse to resolve conflicts in a healthy way, to express love and affection freely. Imagine your children growing up with these positive examples, learning healthy relationship skills that they'll carry into their own lives. So by breaking free from negative generational patterns, you're not just healing your marriage, you're healing your family legacy, and you're creating a new, healthier pattern for generations to come. And that, my friends, is incredibly powerful and absolutely worth it. So if you are feeling inspired to start breaking free from generational patterns in your own marriage, I have an exciting opportunity for you. I'm offering a free masterclass called How to Save Your Marriage and Find Inner Peace. In this masterclass, we'll dive deeper into identifying and transforming subconscious patterns that might be affecting your marriage. You'll learn powerful techniques for rewiring these patterns and create the loving, fulfilling relationship you desire. So if you'd like to sign up for this free masterclass, just head over to my website, erinjeancoaching.com, and click the link. Don't miss this chance to start transforming your marriage and your family legacy. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with this thought. You have the power to break free from generational patterns and create a new legacy of love and connection in your marriage and family. It's not always easy, but it is always worth it. Remember, every small step you take towards healing these patterns is a gift, not just to yourself and your spouse, but to generations to come. So thank you so much for joining me today on this journey of breaking free from generational patterns. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with a friend who might benefit. And don't forget to sign up for the free masterclass. It could be that first step towards transforming your marriage and your family legacy. Until next time, keep nurturing your love. And remember, you have the power to create a beautiful new chapter in your family's story. This is Erin Jean signing off. Take care, my friends.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're feeling blessed by the content here, the number one way you can show me is by leaving me a written review of the show. I'd be forever grateful. Knowing that you're out there listening helps me know that I'm truly living out God's purpose in my life. The other thing you can do is take a screenshot of this episode, share it with a friend, or better yet, tag me on your Instagram stories. Remember, you are seen, known, and loved. May God richly bless you today. All my love, Erin Jean.